So we've got a small group live right now. We have years of a story to cover in a short amount of time. But Annie, you're a wonderful storyteller. And what I did and what I'm going to share is just a slideshow that is a collection of pictures from Blue Rock Station over many years, just to kind of give you that picture of what the story that some of us on the call have seen and been to, but not everybody has. So we want to be able to really share that with everyone, because the pictures are really worth 1,000 words.
Well, just to say, this is the beginning construction of the Earthship, which has been the center of all of the work that we've done. So 2,200 tires rammed full of earth. Lots of reuse, repurpose. 1993. Lots of beer bottles, very popular item for walls. In the early days, we had llamas, and we used them for trekking. It was a great way to talk about conservation. This is the first straw bale workshop that I did with a skeleton of a little barn that I had taken apart and put back up. This is last summer at our goat stock, when the BBC was there to film. Everybody was cutting mint and things. That's the entrance, the main entrance to the building, to the Earthship. That's our privy in the background, and I'm here with one of our interns. Everybody getting ready for the party. This is what we call the Overlook, where we eat and do all kinds of things in the summer. That's the front of the house and part of the garden.
This is the last slide. Snuck in that picture of everything exciting that we have coming up as well. You have an amazing story to share, both about your journey, how Blue Rock Station came to be part of your journey, and why you've taken steps to figure out what's next for your farm in a really creative and unique way that I think a lot of us can learn from when we're thinking about farmland transition and long-term preservation of our farmland. So I would love for you to be able to tell us about, for you, like your sense of place, just to ground us, and then perhaps how that led you to the having Blue Rock Station be such a big part of your life.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to have the opportunity, because I think we all have dreams, and I've always been a big goal setter and a project planner. And so in 1982, in 1981, I met Jay Warmke, and he was very serious, and I was not serious. And he wanted to get married, and I didn't want to get married. I said, "Oh, I'm just really bad at that." And he said, "Well, you won't be bad at it because you're going to marry me." So that turned out to be true. But I did tell him that when I got to be old, I wanted to go back to be a farmer again. And he's like, "I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. I just want you to be my wife and live with me forever and let me adore you." So that was the plan. And I say that little story because I feel like my life at Blue Rock Station, I've been walking to that place all my life. When you look at the buildings, you look at all the things that have happened there, you see my brain. But for me, it was a calling. It was a place where, as a child, I discovered trees and pasture were a sanctuary away from people who were mean. And to me, that's what the farm always represented, was a place of security and safety. So I had this big dream to be a farmer again. And as luck would have it, our granddaughter was going to be born in Zanesville, Ohio. And so we didn't want to be absentee grandparents. So I went early, waiting for the baby to arrive. And we were really excited about all of that. And I started looking at vacant land. And it was a horrible experience. So, I mean, they were showing me coal slags, and, you know, it's the eastern foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And so it's, you know, really hilly and sort of obnoxious in places, but very beautiful. And I got tired of looking at the horrible parts of it. And I contacted Bruner Land Company, and they would go in and buy big pieces of land and then cut them up. And as it worked out, the piece of land that we ended up buying was part of a bigger farm, Anders Farm, and I went to see the farm, the land, and when I got there, it just didn't make any sense to me. So I drove down the hill and used the payphone because there were no mobiles in that day, and the woman said, "Oh, you should have gone to the left." And I said, "Yep, going to the right. It's my problem my whole life. So left, we're going." And it was really exciting. And I looked at Jay, who had come in to wait for the baby to be born too. And I said, "Let's write the check." So we bought initially 14 acres, and then they sold off all the other plots before we could make up our mind about buying more of it. But then after I was working to plant trees and things, those first couple of years, the guy that was living next door, it was just awful what he was doing, and the noise and the dogs barking and not being fed and no water. And so I sent him a letter and said, "I would love to buy your place if you ever want to sell." And he called me the next day, and I got the land a lot cheaper. I just took over his payments. So we ended up with 38.2 acres at that point, which was really great. So from the beginning, we had a 10-year plan. And the point of that was to guide ourselves. We didn't know what we were doing, but we did have a goal to create space for people that we cared about who might come and spend time with us. And this would be a retreat, a bunker. And then when our granddaughter was born, we became the parents. And that was something that was completely unforeseen. And so there was a joy in it and a tremendous sadness in it, but we had the land, so something good had to happen. So when Catlin, that's our granddaughter, when she was about 5 months old, she was laying on my belly, and we were listening to community radio, WMNF, in Tampa, Florida. And I heard Michael Reynolds, the architect that designed Earthships, talking about building with clean waste, tires and cans and bottles. And I looked at my precious granddaughter and I said, "You and Mama are going to do that." Now, I had no idea. I never built anything in my life. My grandma gave me some sheets once, and I used to clothespin them over the swing set to make a place to hide from my mother and play house. And I loved all that, but that was not physics. That was just hanging out. So anyway, I started planting fruit trees because I realized that I could create a tax deduction by planting trees on the land. And Jay thought that was a great idea. He didn't care about the trees. He heard the tax deduction part. So he's like, "Okay, we're good to go. Anything you say, Annie." And so I planted a lot of fruit trees. And then in 1996, I worked a deal with the architect to have 2 of his wannabe architects that were waiting for their certification to come and help me start the house. And I had to get a letter from the EPA to have the right to possess 100 tires or more. And so we were off to create what we wanted to do. I wanted to have a contractor, but everybody thought I was insane that came to look at the project. And Jay would walk up the hill with them and show the contractor what we wanted. And then he would look at Jay and he'd say, "Is that woman insane?" Meaning me. And Jay would say, "No, she's the sanest person I've ever met." And that was the last time we saw the person. So, I mean, we kept saying, "This is the future, reuse, repurpose." And they're like, "You are nuts." So that was fine. I've been called nuts before, but I turned out to usually be somewhat right anyway. So we created the project. I spent the summers in Ohio working on the project, building the house, and hiring a crew. And after a couple of years, it was really interesting because the people that came to work with me had very poor work ethic. And they were very racist and sexist. And of course, I'm a woman trying to run a project, and I got a baby, and then I have a little 2-year-old, and then I got a 3-year-old. And, and I took barns apart. So I had lumber. I took 9 barns apart that were going to be burned or torn down. So I had a lumber yard. And anyway, but these guys were just at some point turned into be amazing people, because I would, if they were saying horrible things, I would say, "All right, you got to put $1 in the jar for being a jerk." And or I'd ask questions like, "Don't you want your girlfriend to make more money than you?" And then they'd say, "Yeah." So then I say, "Well, you must be a feminist." And then we'd have a whole day of arguing about feminism. So anyway, but at the end of the season, when I was getting ready to leave and go back to the South where I lived at the time, we would have a party, and they would bring friends and family and their kids, and everybody would be so proud to show their project. And that was really the beginning of creating community in what we were going to do in every phase. And I will tell you that today, so this is 2025, so it's a long time ago that these men worked for me, but there's one that had some problems with the law, and I helped him a bit, and he ended up getting a job at FedEx. And whenever we get a FedEx package, there's a note on it from him saying, "Love you," or "I miss you," or whatever. And that's very rewarding, because you just think about the change you can make when you do the right thing. So anyway, so then we decided we would leave the country and watch from across the pond in Europe as to what was happening after 9/11. And we lived abroad for 3.5 years. And during that time, we created a business plan for what we would call Blue Rock Station. And by the time we came back, our granddaughter at that point was about to turn 11. And we got llamas because she would like to have llamas, and she showed llamas at 4-H, and it was a really powerful thing for her. But we created classes. We had a business plan. Our mission statement was that we would reuse, repurpose, recycle, and we would have fun. And the last part was we would not work for anybody but ourselves. And that was a driving thing for us, because we felt we had to have autonomy in order to create the ideas and carry out the ideas that we had with building a house out of trash. And so we ended up building on our property about 17 buildings. Most of them are small cottages, a small barn, things like that. And we've also built a lot of those buildings in other places, because we use the land to teach people how to build. Our strategy was to teach people how to do something, not give it to them. And that became a tremendous driving force. So we ended up with goats. We taught goat college. A guy was going to sue me for calling it goat school. He said he owned that term. So we said, "Hey, college sounds even more hoity-toity, so we'll just be goat college." So we did goat college. We taught cheese making. We taught lots of things about how to build buildings with clean waste. And then I had this idea that we needed community, and we were not surrounded by the people that we really felt could support what we wanted to do. And so I sent out some notes to different colleges, and we had, and I was speaking at the OFA conference that year, the Organic Farm Association conference that year, and a young woman from Oberlin came up to me and asked if she could be an intern with us, and she was getting ready to graduate. And her name is Elise, and she became our very first intern, and she still is very involved with us. And she, this last year, became a farmer. She's an environmental engineer, but a scientist. But it's an example of what a long-term relationship has been with people that we form community with. Because when you live in rural America, it's isolating. In the early days, you know, when broadband was available for pennies in cities, we had none. But we were trying to have a business. We're trying to market to attract people. And so it was a lot of challenges. Yeah, lots and lots of challenges. Challenges with local people. Some really harsh things happened that were very disturbing during the early years of our life at Blue Rock Station, because people, they sent letters saying they hated us because we ate salad. We're like, what? Cows eat salad? Good Lord Almighty. And so anyway, we just learned that in order to build community, we had to think about it differently. And so the interns came. More than 100 have lived with us in the summers. We have taught them, we always say we have 5 minutes of your brain. We're going to teach you everything we know about living in a resilient way. We live in community, we make menus, we cook together. Those interns, and towards the end of the story, I'll share exactly how they have come to really drive the machine, the business of Blue Rock Station. Anyway, so at some point, we got grants from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, and we were able to enlarge our fencing, our pastures with more fence. By then I had a pretty good goat herd, and I would sell goats, dairy goats, and I would teach people how to have dairy goats, and we did a lot of things with natural health. I wrote 3 books about goats, keeping goats, and we wrote a textbook at one point about renewable energy, and that was when things began to change for us. So we also were always open for people to come and take a tour. And that was insane, but we felt we had to market ourselves. We had to figure out, we didn't want to set too many barriers, but free is never a good thing. So we charged $2.50, and you could show up anytime you wanted, and people would always show up at mealtime. So then we had to feed everybody, because my grandmother would have had a fit if I hadn't fed everybody. And then eventually, I mean, at the end, we charged $25 a person, and we still were full. We always turned people away. We used to have bus tours. 55 people came. I hated it. I just hated it. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be, you know, the song and dance person. I wanted to have a real conversation with real people, because what we were doing was serious work about the future, about reuse, about resiliency, and how we could care for ourselves. And young people, the interns were starving for this. When in the exit surveys, when they would leave, we would always have a party and make what we called parting gifts. And we would sit around and say what we had learned from each other. And the main takeaway always was about community, about how they didn't ever realize, they never realized that what a joy it was to live in harmony with other people, to work out problems, to make food together. These are all things they never had done in their life. And we sometimes would try to work out ways that they could recreate this in their life. But I always said, look, you won't be able to get rid of me. I'm in your head forever. And so we know now that all of those experiences had a huge impact on their lives, because they kept coming back. And we have 2 events a year. One's called Goat Stock, where in the summer around Jay's birthday time, we have a big party with music and tie-dye. And we used to have speakers also talking about things that were relevant. And then we have Yule, where they would come at Christmas time. So we weren't you know, in conflict with them being with their families. And they would come from college, and we had one that was in the Peace Corps, and she came back from Jamaica, and her dad thought she was coming home the next day, but she didn't tell him because she wanted to come to Yule and she wanted to stay all night because the day after Yule we would pick the names that we would choose from for the baby goats, and that was a really big deal. So anyway, the life that we chose to have there was rooted in living in a very honest way. We knew how much we were going to use in terms of products like toilet paper and things. We recycled as much as we could, but that wasn't our first goal. Our first goal was reuse and repurpose. We lived in a closed system where we had privies and commercial composting toilets, so that everything that was, as we say, deposited became an addition to growing food by being mixed in with other compost. So dilution being the solution to just about anything. At some point, I had had enough of having lots of people come, and particularly the classes. We would have week-long classes, and I was very mistreated by many of the people who came. They would call me girl, come here and wait on me, because I was the person doing a lot of the cooking, and my husband was doing the building, which was funny in the beginning because he had never really pounded a tire or anything, but he's going to teach that tire pounding. And it was necessity, because he said, as I cried saying, I know how to do it and you don't, I don't want to cook food. He said nobody would eat the food that I would make, so you have to be the cook. Anyway, I just had enough. I was like, I'm a smart person. I know how to do things. I am doing a lot of non-traditional female things. And I'm the farmer, I'm the builder. And so I decided the way that I would deal with this is to invite former interns and some of our former students, and also some of our friends from our other life who were very successful business people. And they came for the weekend, and my cousin came with his boat. We went on the river. We looked at every resource. We had very honest conversations about what we were hoping for. And it really all came back to one thing, and that was solar. My husband and I had created this textbook on renewable energy, and we said, oh my God. So the next day, it's like we had just not been looking, because the next day people started calling. We had more business than we knew what to do with around solar. And so he went off doing what he does, being brilliant and being the sage on the stage. And he's written several books and textbooks, and that became really the heart of what he was doing. So then here's Blue Rock Station. I'm the person that runs Blue Rock Station. So what do I want to do? So at some point, I started to think about, what will I do with Blue Rock Station when I'm old? And I don't mean old like in age, but unable to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm a person who has had a hard life before I knew my husband. I've had a really great life since I have known him. But I always was like, I got to have a plan. And I don't want to be at the mercy of what the government tells me or the medical world tells me. I want to have control over as much of my life as I can. And I knew I'm going to die on this land. This is where I'm going to be. And I'd been walking there all my life. And I have to say, in all sincerity, that there were many days when I would walk back from the barn milking or whatever. That I get to do this work. It's not I have to do this work. I get to do it. I get to meet people and talk about conservation and talk about stewarding the land and caring about the land and the value of the livestock and the value of the livestock guardian dog and all the things that we were doing, the forest land, which was so powerful and important to me. So anyway, what ended up happening, we had all this conversation, and everybody's in the room looking at Jay and me, and they said, just do the solar thing, and Annie will do her thing, and it'll all work out. And that became sort of the predictor of where we were going and where we are today. We also did a lot of other things like consulting. So we created other projects. We worked on a lot of other projects in a variety of ways. Me, mainly project management, and Jay oftentimes helping design projects. And then the really big game changer, was right up at the point where 2019, that year, our goals were very focused on, so we have a 10-year plan. Every year we revisit that and add the next year. And so we really had to get our classes online. And broadband was such an issue. It was just horrid. It was worse, the speed was worse than dial-up, although we were paying $300 and some a month for less than dial-up. So we said, all right, this is the year, do or die. And then came COVID. So that then changed everything. We had to create a whole new business model in terms of how we're going to get our product out there. I remember thinking I was supposed to do some classes. We had bodacious women classes where we do things with women. I would teach, and we would do confidence building and things like that. And I'm like, okay, Zoom, we have to do Zoom. I don't know, I'm not really that great at technology. And then Zoom just seemed like a foreign language, but somehow we managed it. And we had like 30 women do this bodacious woman class, and it was shocking. It was really shocking. And I mailed packages to them. Everybody loves to get a package in the mail. And the package came, and that was all the things they needed for the online class. And gosh, I don't know how we did it. Jay had to learn a whole new program. He had to learn, he's really smart about all that, but still it was super stressful. And we got COVID, December 2019. One of our former interns had gone to Toronto, and he came to stay with us for a few days. That was rough. So it's just one thing after another after another. So I decided the way I was going to deal with all that was to form a farm advisory board. And that's when Ian McSweeney, who's on this call, came into my life. I had heard him on some kind of webinar or something. I think, it was with the Farm Animal Concern Trust, FACT. I had gotten some grants from them, and so they had me come and teach and do things, and I loved their webinars. So Ian was speaking on the webinar, and that's the first time that it hit me that I had an answer for what I wanted to do when I couldn't be the farmer anymore. That I could protect my land, I could protect the investment I had made emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically, and I could carry on the beliefs that I had without having to be thinking I got to be in control of it. So then we formed the advisory board. We had Ian come on a webinar and talk to everybody who thought I was going to die. They're like, oh my God, you're going to die. And then people started crying when the thing was over. I'm like, not yet, not dying yet. I'd be a lot further along in this process if I thought I was dying already. And so it became a thing of, so all these lovely people who had spent their summers with me while they were in college or while they were figuring themselves out became my advisors. That was so incredible. It was beyond incredible. I remember that first meeting that we had, and there were 15 of these young faces staring at me on a Zoom call. And I was like, wow, I got to be a part of these beautiful people's lives, and now they have so many good ideas, and they believe in what we're trying to do as stewards on the land, and they have an investment. They've maintained this sense of, I have an investment in this place, and a commitment to Annie. I remember many times when they would be, going away and thinking they may not see me again. And they would say, do you think that people my age can be friends with somebody who's your age? And I would say, well, we'll give it a try. And it worked. So now they're my advisors, and that has been maintained. And at some point, I realized that maybe we should start to begin to have a plan of where else would we live if we had to leave the farm, because we needed broadband. And our business was being held back. The solar business was being held back without really good high-speed internet. And so we started going, Jay and I went to different towns and stayed overnight a few times, and we just kept coming back to Marietta, which is the first settlement in the Northwest Territory, and it's a very historic, beautiful little town of 15,000 people with 2 colleges. And I made friends there. I went to the Unitarian Universalist Church because I wanted to find some support system. And at some point, I just announced one day, let's go look at houses. And Jay was like totally wigged out about that, but he did think it was a good idea that I was like thinking, well, we should figure out what we're going to do when we get too old, be old farts together, then we got to figure out what do we do. So we looked at a couple of houses, and then we came to the house on 8th Street, and Jay was like a little kid. Now, we had owned houses before, rentals and things that we fixed up, and Jay would always say, now when we meet with the realtor, don't have any emotion. Don't say anything about any of it unless it's critical. So I'd be like, okay, I won't say anything. So we come into this house. He goes all the way to the attic. He comes racing back down like he's 8 years old. And he says, Annie, you have to come upstairs. This is the most amazing house. I'm like, wait, what happened to you? Who is this man in my husband's body? Anyway, so we ended up buying the house. And it was such a great thing because it was good timing for him. I knew he was burned out on the farm, and but he didn't know it yet. But he's really loved being in town, and that was 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago now. So that brings us back to what happens next. Big changes in life, and you don't expect it. So a year and a half ago, well, really 2 years ago, my dogs gave me a concussion. They knocked me down. They were so happy to see me, and they gave me a concussion. And I have traumatic brain injury anyway, so that was really harsh. That was at the end of October. Then, the 1st of January, I came down with COVID in my heart. That was a shocker. I'm not used to being sick. I'm not used to sitting down. I have things to do, and I want to do them. And then, the first day I was feeling really good. And I work with with 4th graders in Columbus with Laura 9. She's a teacher, and they hatch eggs for me every single year. And those kids are inner city kids. They are tough. Some of them have been in touch with the law. They've seen people murdered. I mean, these kids, whoa. But they are so good with these chicks and also with the whole process of hatching the chicks. And they've never injured a chick. And they teach them to go in because they build little houses. So they always come ready to go in at night. It's so great. I love it. Anyway, so I go to get more eggs because I didn't have enough at another farm. And the driveway gave away. And part of me went down the hill and the other part of me stayed standing. And so I basically broke my foot off. And that was really, there's a really wild feeling sitting there thinking, okay, is anything hurt? And I go to pull my leg up and my foot isn't attached. It's just dangling. So it was a long process. I had to learn to walk again. It was humbling. 60 days of every day. One of those darn little interns and students showing up at the house from California, from France. Nobody coordinated it. They just came. And they did dishes. The first intern that we had, a woman, she gave me a bath. Oh, that was humbling. So I had to learn to walk again. but they made life so amazing for me. They made great food. Anyway, so just before this all happened, I had heard Christina Villa, who is the other person who's the co-director of the Farmers Land Trust, who was on a webinar with the Women Food and Agriculture Network. And I've done a lot of work with them. We have organized, my friend Carrie, the Bison Rancher, we've done a lot of workshops for them and stuff. And there was Christina, and I said, oh, I had forgotten about that. And this was right before I broke my leg. So it was like constantly this sort of reminder that I got to have a plan. I can't just leave it to chance, because what will happen to my precious stewarding land? So I realized that I had to sell my goat herd. I had to sell my chickens. It was devastating. It was so devastating. And this is a constant thing when I talk to other farmers who don't know what they're going to do with their farm. They have nobody to give it to or leave it to, and or to inherit the land. And they'll say, with tears in their eyes, I stay awake at night thinking, what will happen to my work, my land? And I completely understand that. So it's been this huge grief process of accepting the fact that I'm not the person I was before I broke my leg. And that learning to walk again was, just so harsh. So off everything went, and then it became the real show. So Ian and Christina came to Goatstock a year ago, 2024, and met some of our wonderful former interns and students and friends, and we had conversations. I'll never forget, I was in shock. The day of Goatstock, we had a meeting in the morning, which we always do, like we call it the advisory board meeting, but anybody could come, and we had 26 of people, friends, former interns and students show up that day with really heartfelt questions and concerns and wanting to know, what's next. And so that began the process. And then in March, I began to understand that, I've been in this place for 22 years, living there 22 years, but we had owned the place since 1993, that the farmer, well, first of all, a lot of things to sort through because I was never going to leave there, so I didn't have to think about it too much. But secondly, I better leave sooner than I thought, because if you're going to be the farmer, you've got to start being the farmer for fall and winter in the spring. You have to have plans. You have to, lay down the groundwork. And so I decided that I would leave by this summer, 2025. And so I worked with the Farmers Land Trust. We came up with a contract. We came up with a plan of how it would work. And then in March, I created some booklets for farmers that would want to be farmers. And we, over time, with a variety of different people helping me, we vetted 14 potential farm families to take over and be the new steward of the farm. And
so Annie,
yes,
let me jump in here, just because the time's going to go really quickly, as we knew, and it is, to say that you've given us like all this emotion with your story to think about. And I was working on writing down just words that really were resonating throughout what you said. Some words you said, some words you didn't say, but I heard community from you, but I also pulled traditions. Like, you created traditions within that community that were really special. There was emotions, not just from you, but from your interns as well, in this process of not discovering just being on the farm in Blue Rock Station, but much, much more, like the intangible things that just words can't even describe, but that creativity that you had, and the resiliency you taught, and you lived, that I think you have influenced so many people who have spent time, a little time and a lot of time, at Blue Rock Station. Because we'll run out of time right now to go into lots and lots of detail, I do want to make sure that we can highlight one of our webinars on February 24th focuses on finding the next generation steward, that whole search and selection process, to dive in, because I think it would be really neat to know more about the booklet you just talked about and the vetting process, and just who are the people that are coming to the farmland preservation through Farmland Commons work, those that are looking to access that land too, as well as make sure we give time for Christina and Ian to have a moment to tell us a little bit more about what to expect in this whole series, in case anybody does need to jump off, because I do want to be cognizant that it is just turning 8 p.m. Eastern time right now. Are you all right if we let Christina and Ian have a moment?
I'm at the end. I'm at the end of the process. I think the one thing I will finish to say is that what it all came down to is that we began to really see the value of intergenerational wealth. And that was a defining moment for me personally, was that the family that ended up coming onto the land has two really wonderful children that we've gotten really attached to. And so we can see, firsthand the value of not just this farm to adults, but what that can mean to a family, their kids who would never have the ability to have this kind of opportunity, not in a million years. So that's the story.
Oh, thank you so much, Annie. I'd like to turn it over to Christina and Ian from the Farmers Land Trust to tell us more about what to expect. And then also just let everybody know, thank you for joining us despite our technical difficulties. Thank goodness for recording so we can catch up, but we will work out all of these details before we meet again on December 16th for the next webinar in this series. I hope you'll consider joining us for that one and everyone after that through April. Christina.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am reluctant to speak because I feel like I could just sit here for hours and listen to Annie tell her story. And there's so much more to share about how you and your whole life, Annie, has led you to this moment and all that you've learned and shared and built and grown. And like, it is just such an honor to get to support you in this transition. And I am moved by everything you shared. So thank you so much for sharing this. And yeah, so the future episodes or sessions that will come after this, the next one will share about the Farmers Land Trust and the Farmland Commons model, and specifically the Blue Rock Farmland Commons, how that project and land transition is coming together and who the partners are. Future sessions will focus on how Annie, her community of interns and supporters, and us, the Farmers Land Trust, all work together to find that next generation steward, and then how they are getting land tenure on Blue Rock Station now. And then in the future, we'll share other sessions, we'll share more in depth on how the land transition is going and where we're at right now when we get to those. So, and then Ian, did you want to share anything? If not, that's
well, just to echo, okay. Like what an honor to be part of this, to witness someone's life work and to be a guide, a partner in that transition. It's humbling work and inspiring work that Christina and I get to do, and we're grateful for that. And I guess the only other thing I'd share is, yeah, Annie, thank you for sharing, pieces of your story now and along the way in so many ways. And just for everyone who's tuned in now and might tune in later, like, I'm sure you all have your own story, and each transition can attune to that and be uniquely caring for your goals, your values. And the sooner you start with something, the better. If waiting until needing to react with a short amount of time it limits the ability to be thoughtful and caring and strategic, and kind of incremental in steps forward, but really kind of giving yourself the time to envision, to feel into things, and then to gently step forward is really a wonderful gift to give yourselves.
I would like to add too that it really, if you add up everything that I talked about, it really does turn out to be 5 years since I started thinking about this seriously. And I would like to add too, for people who might be leaning into thinking, what do I do next with my land or my farm or whatever, is that Christina and Ian have been so wonderful to work with. I've taken my heart and soul into this, and I have never for even an instant doubted that they were the right people to help me and guide me and hold my hand and push me to be in this process. And I feel also that what I'm doing is taking my resources and maxing the potential by saying, how do we take a tax code and reuse it and create a way for this farm family to come onto the land and develop their own way of moving forward. So I encourage people, if they have any questions or want information, Christina and Ian are very accessible, and honestly, they're two of the best people ever.
We think that about you too.
Well, it's true. What can I say? It's true. We're also...
Well, I think you're all superstars, which is why I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to partner and build this awareness and get a really great story out there, and talk more about this community. We have a lot more to talk about. So yeah, this is just the beginning for sure. But we do want to continue to build community around this conversation, and what is the future of our farmland, and who's going to be on our farmland and the stewardship. So thank you to the Farmers Land Trust, and thank you to Annie and Blue Rock Station for being part of this, and for the other organizations that are supporting and getting the word out for our event today and the whole series that's out there. So I hope everybody can join us again. Feel free to share the word too with your networks. The more people that hear about this and know about this, the better we can all be about thinking about the future of our farmland and that resiliency. So thank you all for your time this evening. I will be getting our recording to our videographer to work on, so we can have it available to share out on our YouTube channel as soon as he is able to do that. I hope I see you soon, and for sure that I get to see you on December 16th, our next webinar.
Thank you, Denise, for being able to see the visionary process of this and for finding value in it. I think you stuck your neck out a bit for us, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's all about community, right?
Yes, it is. That's true. So thank you. See you all soon.
Everyone. Thank you. And thank you, Annie.
Thank
that
you.
was so beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks.